Bullies mess with the wrong new girl. But they don't know she's a fierce fighter. Hello everyone. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to hear more meaningful stories. Maya Johnson stepped off the yellow bus, her sneakers crunching lightly against the pavement as the door hissed shut behind her. It was her first day at Brooklyn High, and the weight of that simple fact settled heavy on her shoulders. A black girl in a sea of mostly white faces. Maya had always been the new girl, the one who came from somewhere else, who looked different, who had to earn her place. She wasn't here to make friends or to stand out, she was here to survive. Slipping her backpack strap tighter over her shoulder, she kept her gaze fixed ahead, her steps deliberate, avoiding eye contact, blending into the crowd of chattering students. The school loomed ahead, a red brick building with tall, dull windows that seemed to watch her as she walked past. She had seen schools like this before, same sterile hallways, same noisy cliques, same uncertainty in the air. This wasn't a new world for her, just another stage to play her quiet part. Maya knew the drill. Slip through unnoticed. Keep your head down, and don't give anyone a reason to remember you. For now, silence was her shield, and she was well versed in the art of invisibility. She passed the throng of students outside, feeling their curious stares seeping into her skin. A whisper here, a glance there, she didn't need to hear them to know what they were thinking. She had been here before. In every new town, at every new school, she was the outsider, the girl from Chicago with the dark skin, the unfamiliar face, the girl who didn't belong. Yet, Maya kept walking. It was all she could do, keep moving forward, find her locker, and disappear into the endless maze of hallways. The sound of laughter, the shuffle of feet, the chatter about parties and friends all blurred into the background. She didn't want to stand out. She didn't want to be noticed. But as she walked deeper into the halls, she could feel it, a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Something was different today, and she couldn't quite put her finger on it. There was a presence that seemed to grow as she passed, eyes lingering. Whispers carrying just a little bit further than usual. Maya tried not to let it bother her, but her stomach twisted. She wasn't the kind of girl who drew attention to herself. And yet somehow, she was already a target. She could feel it in the air. This would not be a quiet year. She realized, not with them watching, not with her trying so hard to be invisible. And yet, always standing out. Maya's instincts kicked in the moment she saw the group, Ashley Mitchell and her entourage moving through the hallway like royalty entering their court. Ashley was impossible to miss, standing tall with a posture that screamed superiority, her long blonde hair flowing effortlessly, as if she had stepped out of a magazine. Her expensive plaid dress hugged her slim frame, radiating wealth and status. But it wasn't just her looks that made her stand out, it was the way the entire hallway seemed to bend to her will. Students parted without a word, their heads ducking in reverence or fear, as if the very presence of Ashley and her crew demanded submission. Maya stood frozen, her back slightly turned, trying to avoid the spotlight. But it was too late. In the blink of an eye, Ashley's cold, calculating eyes locked onto hers. There was a flicker of something, contempt, maybe, or challenge, in Ashley's gaze. It was brief, but unmistakable. Maya was no longer just the quiet new girl, she had been marked. Ashley had drawn the invisible line, and Maya had unknowingly stepped into her territory. Maya swallowed hard, trying to ignore the suffocating feeling in her chest. She refused to react. She wasn't here to play games, especially not with someone like Ashley. But the weight of that look, the silent promise of something coming, settled in her gut like a stone. Ashley didn't need to say a word for Maya to understand the power dynamics at play here. She wasn't just another student at Brooklyn High, she was the queen. And this school was her kingdom. Maya was the intruder. And intruders, no matter how quiet they were never allowed to stay unnoticed for long. As Ashley and her friends walked past, Maya couldn't help but feel the weight of their presence. The murmurs and glances in her direction were subtle but undeniable. The battle had already begun. Even if Maya hadn't raised a finger, she kept her head down, trying to avoid their gaze. But she could feel it. The challenge had been set, and Maya had no idea yet how much her life was about to change. The day dragged on, each moment heavier than the last. Maya sat through class, her gaze fixed ahead, as the whispers behind her back grew louder. It started innocently enough, harmless giggles, passing comments, and teasing. But as time passed, the mocking words sharpened, becoming more pointed, more personal. She thinks she's too good for us. One girl whispered loudly enough for Maya to hear. What's with the weird accent? Doesn't she know she's not in Chicago anymore? Maya kept her gaze fixed. Her hands clenched tightly in her lap, the pencil she held almost breaking under the pressure. She had been here before, this wasn't new. She had moved from school to school, town to town, and yet, the pattern remained the same. The isolation, the staring, the whispered judgment, it was all a game to them. A silent war fought in corridors and classrooms. They couldn't stand her quiet strength, couldn't fathom someone who refused to bend, to react. They needed her to break, to show fear, to let them see their power over her. But Maya knew better than to give them that satisfaction. She had learned long ago that silence was a shield, a weapon, and above all, a choice. Her father had always taught her to endure, to remain calm, to never let anyone see her crack. But what Ashley and her followers didn't realize was that Maya's silence was not an invitation to attack, it was a warning. She wouldn't break, no matter how many times they pushed. Still, it was becoming clear that this wasn't going to be a simple game of quiet endurance. Ashley was relentless, and Maya could feel her watching her, calculating her every move, waiting for any sign of weakness. With each passing hour, the tension grew, tightening around her chest like a vice. Maya knew it wouldn't be long before things escalated. Ashley wasn't the type to stop until she had claimed victory. And Maya, though determined to hold her ground, could feel the storm coming. But she wouldn't run. No, this time, she wasn't going to be the one hiding. Ashley had marked her as a target, and it seemed the only way to survive this was to face it head on. The question was, could Maya remain calm long enough to win? Or would she fall into the trap they had set for her? One that would break her once and for all? The cafeteria buzzed with the usual chaos of lunch hour. But Maya could feel the shift in the atmosphere as she walked in. It wasn't just the usual noise or the scattered conversations, it was the feeling of eyes on her. Every gaze sharp and heavy with expectation. It was as if the entire room was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Maya knew what was coming before it even began. The group had already marked her as the target, and she could almost feel Ashley's presence before she saw her. Maya kept her head low, aiming for her usual corner, the one farthest from the center of attention. The one that had become her sanctuary. She wasn't interested in making a spectacle of herself, and the last thing she wanted was to draw the spotlight. But today wasn't going to be that simple. The moment she set her tray down, a subtle shift in the air made her stomach tighten. She could hear the clicking of high heels, the confident stride of Ashley and her cronies approaching. The crowd seemed to part just for them, as though they were following an unspoken command. Ashley's eyes locked with Maya's for the briefest of moments. A sharp, assessing stare that made Maya's skin crawl. Then, as if on cue, the mocking laughter started. Brianna and Courtney, Ashley's ever-loyal sidekicks, joined in, their laughter echoing through the room. They made their way over to Maya's corner, a subtle smirk on Ashley's lips as she leaned in, her voice dripping with mock sweetness. "You look a bit lonely over here," she purred, loud enough for everyone to hear. The words like daggers disguised as casual conversation. Maya's hands tightened around her fork, but she refused to react. No matter how hard they pushed, she wasn't going to let them win. She wouldn't give Ashley the satisfaction of seeing her rattle, wouldn't show a flicker of anger or frustration. But when Ashley pretended to trip and spilled a drink, splashing red juice all over Maya's tray, the entire cafeteria erupted. The laughter was deafening. People were watching, waiting for Maya to crack, for her to explode or crumble, to show them that she was just as weak as they hoped. But Maya didn't flinch. In a single fluid motion, Maya calmly stood up, her movements precise and deliberate. She lifted her tray, now ruined with juice, and without a word, walked to the trash bin. The silence in the cafeteria was palpable. No one moved, no one breathed, as they watched Maya dispose of the mess with a calm so unnerving it left the whole room frozen in disbelief. She didn't scream, didn't yell, didn't even raise her voice. She just tossed the tray and walked back to her seat. The cafeteria, once alive with laughter, had become a ghost town. Maya didn't need to say a word. Her calm composure, the way she stood there untouched by their cruelty, said everything. It wasn't the reaction they were expecting. It wasn't anger or shame. It was a quiet defiance, a strength that spoke louder than any outburst ever could. As Maya settled back into her seat, she glanced up at Ashley, who stood frozen, her smile faltering, her eyes wide with a mixture of surprise and something far more unsettling, fear. Maya didn't care about Ashley's fear. What mattered now was that she had made her point. This game, this petty power struggle, was over. Maya wasn't the helpless victim they thought she was. And no amount of ridicule would ever make her break. She had faced their cruelty head-on, with the calm that came from knowing that true strength didn't lie in reaction but in the choice to stay composed. No matter the storm. The next day, as Maya walked into the school, a strange sense of tension lingered in the air. Brooklyn High, once a place of familiar chaos and muted glances, now felt like an entirely different world. Students moved with purpose, their whispers rippling like waves around her. The eyes that used to glance at her with indifference or curiosity now seemed to linger, measuring her, unsure of what to make of the calm, unyielding presence she had become. Maya wasn't just the quiet girl from Chicago anymore. She was something else entirely, something that no one knew how to categorize. As she made her way through the hallways, Maya couldn't help but feel the weight of Ashley's gaze tracking her every move. She knew the challenge was coming, that Ashley wouldn't let her walk away unscathed. But Maya wasn't afraid. She wasn't here to win or lose in their petty game of power. She was here to make a stand, not just for herself, but for anyone who had ever been pushed into silence. It didn't take long for the storm to find her. At lunch, as usual, Maya took her seat in the corner, the place she had grown to cherish as her small corner of peace. But peace was a fleeting thing in this school, especially now. Ashley, with her entourage of Brianna, Courtney, Zach, and Luke, swept through the cafeteria like a storm. Their laughter echoed through the room, sharp and mocking, as they made their way to Maya's table. This time, there was no pretending. Ashley was ready to push Maya to her breaking point. Maya's heart didn't race, her breathing didn't quicken. She knew exactly what was coming, and she wasn't going to let it get to her. The moment Ashley arrived at her table, she didn't waste time with small talk. Feeling lonely? Ashley purred, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. You should join us, if you're not too busy being different. Maya stared up at her, unfazed, her eyes cool and steady. Ashley sneered, her lips curling into a malicious smile. With a quick motion, she tipped her cup, spilling juice all over Maya's tray. The crowd around them erupted in laughter. But Maya didn't flinch. Her expression remained calm, unaffected. Slowly, she stood up, her movements fluid and deliberate. Without a word, she picked up her tray and walked to the trash bin. The entire cafeteria fell silent. No one expected this. They expected rage, tears, or humiliation. But Maya gave them none of it. She simply discarded the mess, then walked back to her seat with the same quiet grace she had entered with. The silence that followed was suffocating. Ashley stood frozen, her hands still hovering over the mess she had caused, her smug smile faltering. The power she had hoped to assert through this humiliation had evaporated. The room was no longer on her side. Maya wasn't the victim anymore. She had become the calm in the storm, the one who refused to bend to their cruelty. Ashley's friends shifted uncomfortably behind her. Brianna and Courtney exchanged uneasy glances. And even Zach, who had once felt invincible at the top of the social ladder, looked uncertain. Luke, ever the troublemaker, now seemed unsure, as if the game he'd played had turned against him. Maya returned to her seat, her back straight, her gaze unfaltering as she stared directly at Ashley. The look she gave wasn't one of anger or hatred. It was simply a quiet acknowledgement of the truth. Maya wasn't broken, she wasn't afraid, and she wasn't going to let anyone push her down. The students around her began to murmur, some with respect, others with curiosity, but Maya didn't care. She had made her point. As the bell rang, signaling the end of lunch, Maya stood up without a word and walked out of the cafeteria. Her head held high. She wasn't going to waste time on this game anymore. Ashley had picked the wrong person to challenge, and the power shift was clear. Maya had finally shown Brooklyn High that silence wasn't weakness, it was strength. Strength they couldn't understand, and strength they couldn't break. The next afternoon, the tension at Brooklyn High was palpable. Maya felt it before she even stepped through the school gates. Something had shifted. Students eyed her with a mix of awe and curiosity. The usual murmurs now filled with whispers of respect and hesitation. Maya was no longer the quiet, invisible girl they had first judged. She had become a symbol, one that no one could ignore. As she walked down the hallway, Ashley Mitchell's icy gaze followed her, sharp and calculating. It had been days since their last confrontation, and Ashley's frustration had only grown. Her attempts to break Maya had failed miserably. And now, she was desperate. She couldn't let this challenge go unanswered. At lunch, Maya took her usual spot, away from the crowd, but she didn't have time to settle before Ashley and her friends appeared, standing like a wall between her and her peaceful corner. This time, Ashley wasn't hiding behind sarcasm or taunts. With a cold smile, she stepped forward, a subtle challenge in her eyes. "Maya," she said, her voice clear, "I hope you're ready for the real test." But Maya didn't flinch. She didn't react to the sudden rush of tension filling the air. She didn't need to. She had already won. Maya's gaze remained calm and unyielding, her silence louder than any words could ever be. The room seemed to hold its breath. Everyone watched, waiting for Ashley to make the first move. When Ashley stepped forward, Maya didn't move a muscle. Her calmness was unnerving, a quiet force that no one could quite understand. Ashley's eyes flickered with doubt. And for the first time, she wasn't sure if she was the one in control. Maya's presence had done what no one else had managed. She had shifted the power in the room. And as the bell rang, signaling the end of another day, Maya stood up, untouched, her steps steady and sure. Without a single word, she walked away, leaving behind the chaos, the whispers, and the broken illusions of those who thought they could break her. By the end of the week, the atmosphere at Brooklyn High had completely transformed. Maya no longer walked the halls in silence, avoiding attention. She had become an unspoken force, her mere presence commanding respect. The students who had once whispered behind her back now watched her with cautious admiration. Ashley, however, was seething with frustration. Every attempt to provoke Maya had failed, and the realization that she couldn't control her left Ashley feeling unsettled. In the cafeteria, the tension hung heavy. Maya sat at her usual corner, her head held high as she ignored the stares that followed her. Ashley, flanked by her loyal group, watched from across the room, her eyes narrowing with resolve. She had to put an end to this. To reassert her dominance, her usual game of subtle torment wasn't enough. She needed something bigger. Something that would break Maya once and for all. Ashley walked over to Maya's table with calculated precision. As she approached, the cafeteria fell silent, the students holding their breath in anticipation. With a swift motion, Ashley slammed her tray into Maya's, causing food to spill across the table. The cafeteria erupted with laughter, eager for the show. But Maya didn't react. She didn't flinch, didn't rise to the bait. She calmly stood, collected her tray, and walked to the trash bin, discarding it with a serene expression. The silence that followed was deafening. Ashley's smirk faltered as the eyes of the entire cafeteria turned not to Maya, but to her. The students who once admired Ashley now looked at her with a mixture of confusion and pity. Maya's calmness, her refusal to be shaken, had turned the tables. For the first time, Ashley felt the weight of her own arrogance and powerlessness. As Maya walked away, leaving the cafeteria behind, she left more than just a scene. She left a message. True strength didn't lie in cruelty or control, but in the ability to remain unbroken. And Brooklyn High would never be the same again. The days after the cafeteria incident were a whirlwind of whispers and nervous glances. Maya moved through the halls with a quiet confidence that unsettled everyone. Especially Ashley. Her power, once absolute, now seemed fragile, cracking under the weight of Maya's unyielding calm. Ashley had underestimated her, and the realization was beginning to sink in deep. Maya's silence had become her strongest weapon, one that Ashley couldn't counter. The tension grew thicker with each passing day, until one afternoon, Maya finally faced Ashley head-on. Behind the gym, as the crowd gathered in anticipation, Ashley stood, flanked by her loyal crew. Her usual arrogance was gone, replaced by a creeping unease. Maya, though, remained composed, her eyes unwavering as she approached. When Ashley mocked her, Maya didn't flinch. With a calm, steady voice, she warned, "You'll regret this." The words hit harder than any insult, and the crowd fell silent. The challenge was clear. Maya wouldn't back down. Then, the confrontation unfolded in an instant. Zach and Luke, Once the bullies' enforcers charged at Maya, but in one fluid movement, she dodged their attacks, using their own momentum against them. Zack fell, stunned, and Luke was swiftly brought to the ground, his arm locked in a hold that rendered him helpless. The crowd gasped, unable to believe what they'd just witnessed. For the first time, Ashley saw herself losing control. Her empire was crumbling, and it was Maya, silent, calm, and unyielding, who had brought it all down. The power shifted. The game was over. The day after the showdown, Brooklyn High felt different. The halls buzzed with an energy that was foreign to Ashley. The once fearful gazes now held curiosity, respect, even pity. Her once dominant presence was now a shadow, slowly disintegrating under the weight of Maya's quiet strength. Maya, on the other hand, walked through the school with an air of calm confidence. She didn't seek recognition or power, but her actions had unintentionally redefined both. In the cafeteria, the atmosphere was palpable. Everyone was watching Ashley. Alone at her table, she sank further into her isolation. Her empire crumbled beyond repair. But as Maya walked by, she paused. No words of triumph, just a simple, quiet gesture. Maya walked to Ashley, standing tall before her, her eyes soft but resolute. "It's over now," she said, her words echoing through the room. Ashley froze, her world collapsing as the school, once her kingdom, now looked at her with indifference. Maya didn't need to say more. She had ended the battle, not with force, but with the power of self-control and quiet strength. As Maya left, the weight of what had just occurred sank into the hearts of everyone watching. True power wasn't about domination, it was about resilience, dignity, and the courage to stand up for oneself. The next morning, Brooklyn High buzzed with an undercurrent of unease, the echoes of yesterday's events still lingering in the air. Students walked through the halls with a new awareness, their eyes occasionally darting toward Maya, who glided through the crowd with a quiet composure. She had become something of a symbol, not of power, but of inner strength and the ability to remain unshaken. Ashley, however, walked the halls as a shadow of her former self, her once dominant presence reduced to whispers and sidelong glances. The gaze she had commanded now shifted, her reputation had been shattered. And the students who once feared her now looked at her with a mix of disdain and pity. Maya's silent victory hadn't just changed how people saw her, it had transformed the very atmosphere of Brooklyn High. No longer was power measured by dominance, but by the quiet, steadfast courage to stand firm in the face of adversity. Maya had won without a fight, and in doing so, had redefined what it meant to truly be strong.